Our health insurance companies, for instance, do not currently pay for integrative treatments at the same rate that they pay for pharmaceutical treatments, if at all, which was something I talked about quite a bit on my presidential campaign. Often, whether it's collectively or individually, it takes a crisis, it takes sometimes a tragedy to make people willing to change their minds.
American author and spiritual leader Marianne Williamson is the author of 13 books, including A Return to Love, Reflections on the Principles of A Course in Miracles. She has served as a minister in church and is widely known as talk show queen Oprah Winfrey's spiritual advisor. She's also an activist who campaigned for a Democratic nomination in the 2020 United States presidential election, but suspended her campaign earlier this year. Marianne, first of all, honored to have you on Zen-Brain. This is truly a unique time in history when most of us find ourselves housebound due to the coronavirus pandemic. India is, as you would have heard, under a 21-day lockdown. I hear cases in the US have surpassed that of any other country. So Marianne, what can we as individuals do to manage anxiety and stress and look forward with hope?
This is a kind of forced global pause. And it's particularly difficult for those of us who are used to moving around all the time, going out, doing. So many of us in modern society live kind of adrenaline-driven lives. We're always running around. And Blaise Pascal, the French philosopher, said that all of man's problems stem from his inability to sit quietly in a room alone. So we're being forced to sit quietly. And a lot of the anxiety that you just referred to was there before. We just weren't dealing with it. Or it was anxiety that we weren't feeling simply because we were not having to look at the issues that now are full on our screen because there's not that much else to do. So it's important to remember that we emotionally and psychologically detoxify, just like you detoxify physically. Things have got to come up in order to be released. So part of hunkering down for this experience is realizing that and knowing that, yes, painful thoughts will come up, triggers. It is externally and objectively a depressing situation. And a lot of us in today's world go on and on about our anxiety, even when things are really pretty good.
That's right.
We have not, as perhaps we might have, developed over the last few years, many of us, the kind of psychological and emotional musculature that provides for personal fortitude. Our generation, neither in your country nor in my country, the socioeconomics particularly, which really we pretend that the cultural differences, oh, here's India, here's America, here's Europe, here's Africa. But it's time for us to evolve beyond that somewhat simplistic description of the world. It's really two major categories. Those who have access to the resources that enable them to navigate life versus those who don't. And in that sense, it's not really that different, whether you live in the United States or Europe or India or Asia or any place else. Now, at a time like this, material means, material resources are helpful, certainly. But at the same time, we're all reminded that this virus doesn't matter, doesn't care who you are, where you are, or how much money you have. So there is a way in which all of us on a certain level are equally vulnerable. And that's the kind of thing that puts us into a deeper place within ourselves than we normally inhabit. It is we're you know, we talk about hunkering down, but it's more of a bunker than it's a hunker. And during this period, it's kind of like if you're on a ship and the captain comes on and says, we're going into a storm. There's no way around it. It's going to be rocky. And you prepare yourself. And if you did not have the kind of emotional and psychological musculature, with which to deal with life storms before, guess what? You're going to learn to develop those muscles now. There's a line, it's not up to you what you learn, it's merely up to you whether you learn through joy or through pain. And I believe that humanity is learning some very important lessons, painfully, in this situation about our common humanity, our common vulnerability, and our common need to organize human civilization in a very different way in the years ahead if we are going to survive and to thrive as a species.
How does one develop this mental and emotional muscle that you're talking about?
I assume that there are various ways, but the way that I know about is spiritually. In the New Testament, there is a line where Jesus says, you can build your house on sand or you can build your house on rock. If you build your house on sand, then the winds come and the rains come and your house is blown away. But if you build your house on rock, then the winds come and the rains come and your house remains firm. Your house is your sense of well-being, your sense of self. And most of us, most of the time, build our house on sand. And what sand represents is those things which change, those things which shift in time. One day you're in the money, one day you're not. One day people love you, one day they don't. One day you have the job, one day you don't. One day people are behaving the way you want them to behave, one day they're not. And our sense of self and sense of security gets rocketed all over the place. And one of the things that we do is to base our sense of security on the absence of such things as global pandemics. Well, this situation is a challenge and an invitation to build our house on rock. What is no different today than it was before the pandemic? That we are on this earth to love and to be loved. That's what all of us want at the deepest level. And that our ability to love one another is what will get us through. That's all there is. You know, when you and I were speaking before about an organization, an effort you're working with in India, helping to feed people. And we don't have the massive problem in the United States that you have on that, but we certainly have a problem. We had 40% of all Americans in the United States who could not afford a $400 unexpected expenditure. We have 40% of our people living in poverty, and where there's poverty, there's hunger. So we have to look in very deep ways, you and your country, me and mine, all of us, as citizens of our nations and as citizens of the world, and ask how safe it is for anyone ultimately to organize our societies in a way that takes care of so few at the expense of so many.
So what are some of the lessons the world can learn from this pandemic?
Humility before nature. You know, there are a lot of theories about how this started. And I don't know if anybody knows for sure or if we ever will. But one of the theories that's gets a lot of play has to do with animals, animal markets. And I think in your country, in my country, in a lot of countries, including China, obviously, there are issues about the treatment of animals, the humane treatment of animals, and the very dangerous conditions that arise when animals are not treated more compassionately. You know, I think we should remember that this situation could have been many things. Yes, it's a virus, coronavirus. It could have been a bioweaponry disaster. Your country, I mean, both of our countries, right? Could have been a nuclear disaster. Could have been a weather disaster. There are so many ways in which we are not currently organizing our countries, our societies, to prevent possible disasters so much as to gain as much profit as we can out of the present, even at the expense of those larger guarantees. Let this horror not go to waste. The worst thing that could happen is that we go back to doing things the same way we did them before this. You know, in my country, I mean, all of our countries have had our disasters through history. Yours, much longer history than mine, but still. We had a terrible economic depression back in the 1930s and 40s. And after that, there were laws and regulations that were instituted to protect us from that happening again. Over the last few decades, they've been whittling away at those regulations because they were inconvenient to people and to forces that really just wanted to get everything possible monetarily out of today. And so in all of our countries, I think it's incumbent upon us as conscious citizens to ask, where are ways that we want to go back to where we were, and where are ways that we want to be different? You know, I had a girlfriend once whose house was all but destroyed in an earthquake in California. And fortunately, she and her family were not in town at the time, very fortunately, because given where the earthquake struck and where their house was built, it could have had tragic consequences. But when I told her how sorry I was, she said something interesting. She said, well, actually, it's come out good because in rebuilding the house, we're making some changes that we always wanted, but weren't able to make. So I think, you know, anxiety and depression and all of that is inevitable on a certain level, given the circumstances and given the things that come up for us. But on the other hand, let's not forget, negative emotions are simply the absence of positive emotions. We have a lot to do right now. We have a lot to think about. And we have, most of us, a lot of people to care for. People who are older than us, people who have underlying conditions. I mean, you were talking about food. Those of us who have enough food in the refrigerator and in the cabinets, what can we do for those who don't? And even thinking, you know, and this is true in your country and it was true in mine, and it is true in mine. There were people who were desperate before this happened. Some of us are living with some desperate situations now, but perhaps might have been more sensitive and hopefully will in the future be more sensitive to others who have been living in very desperate situations even before this happened.
You were speaking about profits. Currently, the approach of the healthcare industry globally is reactive. Would you agree? Rather than preventive. So you've been a huge proponent of preventive healthcare and wellness. What actions can we as a society and perhaps our governments take to ensure that preventive healthcare is a priority?
Well, forgive me, I have quite a bit of ignorance about your healthcare system in India. But I know in the United States, there's simply so much more money to be made on sickness than on health. Now, we have a lot more of a health and wellness space professionally than we ever had before, because the whole notion of integrative medicine has taken hold. People understand you can't just not take care of your body, and then when you get sick, try to eradicate or suppress, physical symptoms. You have to cultivate health. You can't just treat disease. So that consciousness is beginning to make its way, certainly in my country, certainly make its way into people's thinking. On the other hand, we have, because it's a profit-making healthcare system, our health insurance companies, for instance, do not currently pay for integrative treatments at the same rate that they pay for pharmaceutical treatments, if at all, which was something I talked about quite a bit on my presidential campaign. Often, whether it's collectively or individually, it takes a crisis, it takes sometimes a tragedy to make people willing to change their minds. And I think that, it's like not just preventative medicine, preventative economics. I mean, we were so vulnerable to this in ways that we should not have been. And even, by the way, literally in terms of the virus, the stronger your immune system is, the stronger, the greater the possibility you can withstand the virus, even if you become infected.
So there is much uncertainty about the future, Marianne, insecurity about jobs, anxiety. Once again, tell us why it's important to keep our focus on the present situation, on the now, as you talk about, and how can we do that?
Who we choose to be today goes far towards determining what happens tomorrow. Everything we do is infused with the consciousness with which we do it. Or as a famous citizen of your country, Mahatma Gandhi said, the end is inherent in the means. So for us now to give into cynicism, to give into despair, to give into hopelessness, to give into powerlessness is a choice. By doing this program, you chose differently. By participating with you, I'm choosing differently. And millions of people are. I mean, there are so many acts of heroism right now in your country, in my country, and all over the world. Some of them absolutely heartbreaking. Some of the heroes, I mean, there is so much heroism, and those stories will be told and continue to be told. In the meantime, you can choose, each and every one of us can choose, and we do choose. We either choose it consciously or we choose it unconsciously. Am I going to be a helpless victim here? Or am I going to stand forth? You know, you and your country and I and mine represent, just by virtue of the opportunities that we have, the power to influence what happens in ways that only belong to a tiny percentage of the human race. And I believe that the universe keeps a perfect set of books. Nothing could be more important than that we make ourselves available to do whatever we can. I think the question is less what do we do, and more do we choose to make ourselves available to whatever we are called to do. Once you make that change in your heart, God use me, the opportunities. It could be a personal relationship. You know, right now, just making a phone call to someone to check up on them can be very meaningful. People particularly who live alone, people who are older. I have a relative, a young, very young person who is very ill. I'm standing up within the family as her relative, I believe, more responsibly than I might have before, calling more often, checking on them more often. Not just because I have time either, but also because I'm more aware of suffering right now.
Marianne, the reason why I asked you about being present in the now is that very often a lot of us are stuck in the past, and we're often anxious because we don't know what the future holds, right? And I remember one of your videos that I watched where you talked about your past and your future being only in your mind, and it's only the now that is here. Would you explain that to us for our viewers in India?
All right, well, let's talk about that metaphysically. So the issue is, as Einstein said, time and space are aspects of the illusion, albeit persistent ones. So where is the past? Where is it? It's only in your mind. And where is the future? Where is it? Only in your mind. The only point of time that we can experience and access experientially is the present moment. So as a student of A Course in Miracles, we're told everything, all the love that you were given in the past was real, was an eternal creation. All the love that you gave was real, was an eternal creation. And everything else was this mortal hallucination, because only love is real. You can enter into the present not bringing the shadow figures and illusions of the past with you. The future plays in the hands of God. The place to purify the past and to purify the future is in the present. If I can know that what matters now, you and I are in this conversation. You have entered this conversation in the hopes of being of service. I have entered this conversation in the hopes of being of service. There is something we can do together that neither one of us could do separately. Our thinking about anything other than how we might show up in this moment as best we can diminishes what power it could have in the future. And in terms of the past, one of the ways we purify mistakes in the past is by trying to get it right in the present.
Wow, that was just incredible what you said. When you can't go outside of your house because of the lockdown, go inside. At Zen-Brain, we keep emphasizing how we can rewire our brains, our minds, the way we think, at any age, at any stage. So now that we are inside, with ample time, what, according to you, would be the 3 things that we can do to rewire ourselves and enable a paradigm shift, perhaps?
Meditate, meditate, meditate. You know, when I was a very young woman, I went to a spiritual seminar taught by a guru, I believe, from your country. And people would ask him questions. And no matter what the question was, his answer was, meditate. And I remember, because I was young, thinking this guy was nuts. He didn't understand my life. I had questions about my boyfriend. I had questions about wanting a career. I had questions about my body. I had questions about this or that. I didn't want to hear meditate, meditate, meditate. And then I remember when I got to the point in my life of realizing, actually, the answer to everything is meditate. Because the way we change a situation is by changing our thinking about the situation. The greatest power we have to change the world is by changing our mind about the world.
Wow.
Who we are standing in the midst of a situation determines how the situation will unfold, which means meditate, meditate, meditate. You know, once again, quoting Gandhi, Gandhi said, the problem with the world is that man is not in his right mind. We are insane, collectively. We are living without an awareness that what matters is that we love one another. And closing that gap between the mind that has forgotten who we really are and why we're really here, that is the mission of our lives. And more and more, not only is it the mission of enlightenment for us as individuals, but it is the imperative for us as a human race if we are to survive and thrive.
Your greatest power to change the world is the power to change your mind about the world. Whoa.
That's a direct quote from the Course in Miracles.
Would you say forgiveness is one of the ways to rewire? I ask you this specifically because I've tried to understand forgiveness a few years ago from something that you've said. Why is it important to forgive, and how can we possibly do that?
There is a natural working in the universe. There are objective, discernible laws of internal phenomena, just like there are objective, discernible laws of external phenomena, just like there's the law of thermodynamics, there's the law of gravity. There's the law, often in the East called karma, in the West called cause and effect. That for every thought, for every action, there's a reaction, and every thought is an action. Now, the golden rule, do unto others as you would have others do unto you, is a prescription for safe living. Because how you treat others is how they will treat you, or if they don't, someone else will. You're getting back what you put out. It's just the law of consciousness. Whenever our minds are holding on to love, correction occurs. That's just a natural functioning of the universe. When our minds are closed to love, when our minds are in judgment, when our minds are in attack, when our minds are in defensiveness, we are deflecting the miracle that would otherwise happen. And what you believe is real will be real for you in your experience. Now, let's say someone did me wrong. Okay? If I believe that only love is real, and as the Course in Miracles says, you were not created to be the effect of lovelessness within yourself or others. If I believe that what you did to me actually happened, then in my experience, I will be at the effect of what you did. The truth is, no matter what you did to me, the universe is already ready to correct it. And anything that was taken from me, the universe is already primed to give it back to me in whatever form, but my holding on to the grievance keeps the universe from doing its thing, as it were. So forgiveness is a selective remembering. It means I'm only choosing to remember the love you gave me. And I'm choosing to realize that nothing else had any real ultimate effect unless I give it reality in my mind. So you forgive out of self-care. You forgive out of self-interest, because you can have a grievance or you can have a miracle. You cannot have both.
So you forgive because you don't want to deflect the miracles that are coming your way.
Yeah, it's like if you did something, you did me wrong, I can carry that belief that I have been hurt. If I'm not forgiving you, I'm believing that you hurt me. I'm believing you took something away from me. So if that's my belief, I will continue to recreate situations that reflect back to me the reality of that hurt, the reality of that wounding. But if I instead, the spiritual concept is, nothing you did to me has any ultimate effect if it wasn't love. The universe, whatever you took from me, the universe is already working on taking it back, giving it back to me. The universe is already working on healing my wound, because that's the way the universe operates in love. But the only thing that can stop that from happening is if I hold on to it. And you see this all the time with people who never stop telling their victim story. And what it does is it attracts more victimization. It keeps at bay the very situations that would heal their wound. So that's part of living in the present. It's a story. Yeah, it happened in the material world. But in the non-material or spiritual world, things are already primed. The universe is both self-organizing and self-correcting. The universe is ready to correct it, but you're holding on to it will hold that back.
The universe is self-correcting.
Look at how the cells operate, and look at how nature operates. Look at how every embryo becomes a baby. Look how every bud becomes a blossom. Look how every acorn becomes an oak tree. Look how nature operates. Look at the cells in the body that are guided through a natural intelligence to collaborate with other cells to serve the healthy functioning of the whole. That's what life does naturally. Not only that, but if you look at our physical bodies, we also have an immune system. So the body also operates in such a way that it can handle quite a bit of injury and harm and disease as long as the immune system is working. So faith is based on knowledge. Faith is not blind. Faith is visionary. Faith means knowing. Faith, spirituality, forgiveness, meditation, these are ways you cultivate a psychological, emotional immune system. Otherwise, things happen and you're too easily thrown off. But knowing that love is real, nothing else exists. You know, look how often somebody, just even in our close personal relationships, yeah, somebody might have hurt you or done something wrong. But if you notice in our intimate relationships, how often we'll make such a big deal over a mistake that somebody made and not give as much gratitude, praise, or exaltation of the things that they did right. You know, maybe you did hurt me, but the day before that, you helped me. The day before that, you supported me. The day before that, you were very charitable towards me. Why am I allowing the fact that you did something wrong be the defining focus of my experience of you? That's our own ego mind. And my ego mind, when it has such a thing, you hurt me, is actually the part of my mind that wants to hurt me. It's interesting. We are always responsible for what we choose to focus on, and that's what forgiveness is about. You can focus on the fact they got it wrong. You can also focus on the fact that they've done a lot of really nice things too.
What you focus on expands.
Absolutely, and what you focus on is what you will experience in yourself. If if I'm so focused on your guilt, I will not be able to feel my own innocence. Now, this issue that you just brought up about what you focus on expands, we want to be careful with that one too, because that one is often misused. You know, some people would say don't focus on something like bad things happening on the planet, but you know, sometimes things expand because we don't focus on them. If you go to a doctor with stage 1 cancer, the doctor doesn't say, well, let's just not think about it, because if we think about it, it will expand. The cancer will more likely expand if you don't think about it. You need to treat it.
At a time where we have the pandemic, any other message that you have, especially during these anxiety-ridden, trying times?
For those of us who believe in God, we want to remember God is with us now, just as God is with us when there's not a pandemic, because God is in our minds. And God is the love that we are capable of giving to one another. I also want to point out that there is a global prayer, 4 p.m. Greenwich Mean Time. It's a global prayer on Sundays, 5 minutes of prayer and meditation, 5 minutes of silence all over the world. So I hope that you and your listeners will join in. And I think the fact that we're doing this all over the world is part of what makes it a good thing.
Marianne, I was reading that your daughter is also named India.
I told my friends I had to go do this call with you. I said, I have to go do this call with India. And all these people were like, well, how would she do this call with India? Because India is doing something else. Yeah, obviously I have a lot of love for your country. I wouldn't have named my daughter India.
Yeah, have you been here?
Oh, yes, a couple of times.
We hope to see you sooner than later once this coronavirus pandemic is under control, Marianne. Thank you so very much for joining me on Zen-Brain, and we hope to have you back.
God bless you. Thank you so much. Good luck to you.